Hello everyone. So in this video we will see the difference between the parliamentary form of government and presidential form of government, or in simple words if I say, what is the difference between India versus USA government. So can you give me some examples of parliamentary form of government except India? Think over it, think in your mind, what can be the example of presidential form of government except USA. Let me give you some names. So you can see parliamentary form of government in Germany and Japan, and Bangladesh also you can see, Australia you can find it, Canada, Italy and Portugal, etc. So in these countries you can find the parliamentary form of government. Okay, and what about the presidential form of government? Where you can find in entire South America, you can see the presidential form of government. In Central America as well, in Africa also, in most of the countries mostly you can see the presidential form of government. And then you can see in Central Asia, and France is some kind of semi presidential form of government, so we will not consider it. I will open up later on those things. Then Russia is also an example of presidential form. In China also there is one party only. So these are the some prominent examples for the parliamentary form of government and the presidential form of government. So एक क्वेश्चन आया था प्री में about the कि what can be the alternative names for the parliamentary form of government. So let me give you that. What are the other names for the parliamentary form of government? And the parliamentary form of government is also known as by the name of prime ministerial form of government. Prime ministerial form of government. Then it's also known by the name of cabinet form of government. This was given as the option in that question. I think it was given in the 2016 pre. You can check it. So it is the parliamentary form of government is also known by the name of prime minister form of government, cabinet form of government, and third name is responsible form of government. Responsible form of government. And the last is Westminster form of government. And this presidential form of government is known by the name only presidential form of government. So what could be the basis of classification? How can we classify, how can we differentiate between the two? So the basis for classification we will use basis of classification, we will see the relative position of whom, relative position or the power of president. So to classify, the first criteria we will use is we will compare the power of the president of the two kind of government. Okay, then the other criteria is how strict the power of separation, how strict the separation of power. So these are the two broad classifications under which we will compare both the form of government and try to understand what are the basic differences between the two. So now I will open up on the relative position of the president. Relative position of the president. Relative position of the president. We will compare using this classification first. So in parliamentary form of government you will find that there are dual executive heads, or there are two heads. There are dual executives or dual heads, where जो president है, he is a nominal head, or we can say he is a theoretical head. It means in theory he is the head, but who is the real head? The real head is Prime Minister. He is the real head in the parliamentary form of government. And but when you look at the presidential form of government, there is only single executive. There is no concept of dual head. Single executive. All the power lies with the president only. So president, he is the head in theory as well as in practice. So in theory also and in practice also, he is the only head. He is the head of the state plus head of the government as well. So what can you draw from this thing, that president is the head in theory and practice, or he is the head of the state plus head of the government? What inference and you deduce from this statement? It means that concentration of power is in the president office. Is in the president office. So it's a very powerful office. He holds all the power. He is the head of the state. He is the head of the government. But in parliamentary form of government, that is in India, what you see, that there are dual heads. One is president, who is a nominal head, under which all the executive works take place in the name of the president only. But who is the real head? Real head is the prime minister. So in India, you will find dual heads. But in US, there is only single executive, that is the president. He is the head in the practice as well as in the theory. He is the head of the state plus he is the head of the government as well. Therefore, the concentration of power is in the president office. Now, who is the leader? Then who is the leader in the parliamentary form of government? Whom you will say the leader? The leader is the prime minister. Prime minister is the leader. And in US, the leader is president. The leader is president. Now we will see the another classification. The first one was the relative position of the president. Now we will see the how strict the separation of power is. So now we will talk about the separation of power. How strict the separation of power in the parliamentary form of government, you will find that the separation of power between the executive and legislature is less strict. It is less strict. But in US, that is in the presidential form of government, you will find the separation of power between the executive and the legislature very strict. They function completely independently. Executive, this is the pillar of executive. Legislature, this is the pillar of legislature. They both function independently. They both are elected independently. So there is a strict separation of power between the two. But what is the condition in India? The separation of power is less strict, and the reasons are: executives are derived from the legislature only. Executive are derived from legislature. क्या मतलब हुआ इसका? जैसे कि अगर कोई भी काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर का अगर जो पार्ट बनता है, एनीवन हु इज काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर it is mandatory for him to be a member of parliament first. तो member of parliament बनकर he can be the council of minister. So what we can derive from this? What we can derive from this thing, that there is a less strict the separation of power is less strict, क्योंकि executives are derived from the legislature only. They have to be responsible to the legislature. They are answerable to the legislature. They can be held responsible by the legislature. They are born in the legislature. So there is no strict separation of power. Okay. सो इन इंडिया जो है हमारे यहाँ प्राइम मिनिस्टर और काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर के लिए इलेक्शंस नहीं होते हैं, जैसे कि यूएस में हमने देखा कि प्रेसिडेंट के लिए इलेक्शन होते हैं. ही इज़ द रियल हेड, ही इज़ द सुप्रीम हेड, ही हैज़ ऑल द पावर इन हिज ऑफिस. बट इन इंडिया यू हैव नो इलेक्शन फॉर द प्राइम मिनिस्टर एंड काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स. दे आर बोर्न इन द लेजिस्लेचर. चुनाव करते हैं एमपी के लिए, मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट के लिए चुनाव होगा. जितने भी एम चुन करके आएंगे, जिस भी पार्टी की मेजोरिटी होगी, उन्हीं में से काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स विल बी चूजन. वो गवर्नमेंट फॉर्म करेंगे एंड दे विल इलेक्ट द काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स. ओके. सो व्हाट वी कैन डिड्यूस फ्रॉम दिस, दैट वी कैन डिड्यूस दैट प्राइम मिनिस्टर और काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स दे डू नॉट हैव टर्म, हैव नो टर्म. जैसे हमने यूएस में क्या होता है, देयर इज अ 4-year टर्म्स फॉर द प्रेसिडेंट, बट इन इंडिया देयर इज नो टर्म फॉर द प्राइम मिनिस्टर और काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स, क्योंकि दे आर बोर्न इन द लेजिस्लेचर. They are first an MP, then they became a council of minister. Okay, so there is no separate election for prime minister and council of minister. So how can they have any term? So they have a term of as an MP, not as a prime minister or council of minister. Okay, and as I have mentioned, that executives shall be responsible to the legislature. Shall be responsible to the legislature. As we have seen under Article 75, Council of Ministers are collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha as they are born in legislature. Why executives are Council of Ministers are responsible to the Lok Sabha? The answer is as they are born in the legislature. जैसे मैंने यहाँ पे एक डायग्राम के थ्रू शो भी किया है. Executives are born in the legislature, so they are answerable, accountable, or responsible to the legislature. Okay. Write one more point, that rule of majority party in Lok Sabha. जिस भी पार्टी की मेजोरिटी होगी वही रूल करेगी. अगर भाजपा की मेजोरिटी आई है लोकसभा में, देन दे विल फॉर्म द गवर्नमेंट. ऐसा नहीं होगा कि मेजोरिटी जो है भाजपा की एंड कांग्रेस सरकार बना रही है, ये कभी नहीं होगा. सो रूल ऑफ मेजोरिटी पार्टी इन लोकसभा. तो हु रूल्स, अगर इस स्टेटमेंट को हम समझे तो रूल कौन करता है? हु रूल्स? एग्जीक्यूटिव रूल्स. द एग्जीक्यूटिव्स, दे रूल्स. ओके. व्हाई द रूल्स? बिकॉज दे आर इम्प्लीमेंटिंग द लॉज. They have the powers to spend the money. So we can deduce from this that the real rulers are the executives. Okay. And what about the presidential form of government? President has independent term as he is elected separately. Okay, write it down. President has independent term. In India, what we have seen, the Prime Minister, Council of Ministers do not have the independent terms. They have the term as an MP, not as a Prime Minister, Council of Ministers. क्योंकि यहाँ पे चुनाव ही नहीं होता है Prime Minister, Council of Ministers का. लेकिन प्रेसिडेंट जो है इलेक्टोरल कॉलेज चूज करके इलेक्ट करके प्रेसिडेंट को प्रेसिडेंट ऑफिस में भेजते हैं. सो ही हैज़ अ इंडिपेंडेंट टर्म एज ही इज़ इलेक्टेड सेपरेटली. ऐसा नहीं है कि वहाँ पर कि लेजिस्लेचर के लिए पहले चुनाव हुआ, उन्हीं में से एग्जीक्यूटिव्स बन गए जैसे हमारे यहाँ होता है. नो, प्रेसिडेंट के लिए अलग से ही चुनाव होता है. ही इज इलेक्टेड सेपरेटली. सो व्हाट वी कैन डिड्यूस फ्रॉम दिस, दैट दे आर नॉन रेस्पॉन्सिबल एग्जीक्यूटिव. दे आर नॉन रेस्पॉन्सिबल एग्जीक्यूटिव. इनकी दे आर नॉट आंसरेबल टू द लेजिस्लेचर। अगर प्रेसिडेंट हैं और उनके सेक्रेटरीज हैं, जैसे हमारे यहाँ तो हम मंत्री बोलते हैं, मिनिस्टर बोलते हैं, देयर वी कॉल द मिनिस्टर्स एज द सेक्रेटरीज। वो इलेक्ट होके नहीं आते, दे आर बेसिकली चोजन बाय द प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ द कंट्री। सो जब प्रेसिडेंट के लिए अलग से चुनाव हुआ है, इलेक्टोरल कॉलेज ने उनको प्रेसिडेंट ऑफिस में भेजा है, देन ही हैज़ द सेक्रेटरीज, so they are not responsible to the legislature, or they do not have to be answerable to the legislature. They can take any action. आपने डोनाल्ड ट्रंप की टर्म चली थी, आपने देखा होगा उन्होंने बहुत बोल्ड डिसीजन लिए थे, ईरान से सारे रिश्ते ख़त्म कर देना। इस तरह के एक्शंस पार्लियामेंट्री फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट में प्राइम मिनिस्टर नहीं ले सकते हैं, बिकॉज दे हैव टू बी रिस्पॉन्सिबल टू द लेजिस्लेचर। उनकी जवाबदेही होती है, he has to be answerable, his government has to be answerable for the action he has done, but so they are the responsible government. But in the presidential form of government we see that they are the non-responsible executives. Okay, the members of executive that is secretaries in US are appointed by president. Who appoint the executives? President appoint the executives. They are not elected, they are appointed by the president in US. We call them secretaries, and therefore they hold the office for the pleasure of the president. They will hold the office for the pleasure of the president, therefore are responsible to the president, not to the house. Therefore they are responsible to the president of the country and not to the house. Therefore you will not find no rule of majority party. In India, we have seen that there is a rule of the majority party, but in presidential form of government, you will see that there is no rule of majority party. जब प्रेसिडेंट के लिए अलग से ही चुनाव करा दिया गया, इलेक्टोरल कॉलेज को प्रेसिडेंट ऑफिस भेजा है, सो वहाँ पर ये मैटर ही नहीं करता कि मेजोरिटी किस पार्टी की है, चाहे वो प्रेसिडेंट किसी पार्टी से बिलोंग करे, प्रेसिडेंट को चुनकर जनता ने भेजा है. सो देयर इज नो रूल ऑफ मेजोरिटी पार्टी इन द प्रेसिडेंशियल फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट. Okay, in parliamentary form of government you will see one more strange case, that lower house can be dissolved by the president. Lower house can be dissolved by the president, but in presidential form of government you will see that the president has no power to dissolve lower house. The president has no power to dissolve lower house. Okay, the third difference which you can see is that the council of ministers swears in the oath of secrecy. Council of ministers swear in the oath of secrecy. But in presidential form of government you will not find this. The council of ministers swears in the oath of secrecy. This enforces the collective responsibility as they work as one unit. This enforces collective responsibility as they work as one unit. प्राइम मिनिस्टर कैप्टन बनते हैं पार्लियामेंट्री फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट में. प्राइम मिनिस्टर बिकेम द कैप्टन ऑफ द काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स, लेकिन दे ऑल आर बोर्न इन द लेजिस्लेचर. All are born in the legislature. After that they have become the council of ministers. So they work in very close coordination with each other. And but in the presidential form of government, what you will see, president is elected. He is the elected head. So and he appoints the executives. And even they are not responsible towards the legislature. They are not answerable. They are not accountable. But in India, first they became MP, then they become the council of ministers. So they swear in the oath of secrecy. This enforces the collective responsibility as they work as one single unit. Okay, so these are the basic differences between the parliamentary form of government and the presidential form of government. Thank you so much.